The emerging technology that we will be covering is eye tracking. Eye tracking is measuring or tracking the point of gaze and movement of the eye relative to the head. An eye tracking device would measure the position of your eyes to determine what you're looking at in applications like visual systems, psychology, marketing, and product design. A familiar application is tracking the human eye for human-to-computer interaction. In the past, eye movement was studied mainly when reading still text or viewing images. The French ophthalmologist Louis Jouvel studied physiological optics in the 1800s. At this time, eye movement was studied by direct observations. Jouvel observed that when reading, the eyes of a human move along the page with a series of short stops or fixations rather than a smooth sweeping motion. This led him to wonder how the eyes chose to stop in terms of time and location. Edmund Huey built the first eye tracking device using contact lenses that had a hole for the pupil. An aluminum pointer connected to the lens would move in response to movement in the human eye. Huey used this device to further study the movement of eyes when reading still text. He found that only some words in a sentence are fixated when reading still text. In the 1950s, Alfred Yarbus found that the fixation of the eye is more dependent on what the reader hopes to gain from the image or text than the actual content or material. The reader's points of fixation can reflect their thought process and their interest. At this point, researchers began to think more about the connection between eye fixation, overt attention, and cognitive processing. The eye-mind hypothesis was introduced in 1980. This hypothesis theorized that when the subject looks at a word or object, he or she thinks about it for exactly as long as the observed fixation of the eye. Complications to this theory arose when considering covert attention during eye tracking recordings. This idea of covert attention could mean that the reader's attention was not directly dependent on what they were looking at. This idea could make eye tracking recordings insignificant to cognitive processing. Soon, many companies started to use eye tracking data for marketing and psychological research. In the recent years, eye tracking has been used to answer questions in human-computer interaction. For example, researching how humans search through computer menus or navigate through different user interfaces. This information has a great impact on newer designs in web and software development. Another great application in using real-time eye tracking results is to help disabled people communicate with their computers in absence of a mouse or keyboard. In 2001, Tobii Technology began to develop this eye tracking technology and recently launched their first widescreen eye tracker, the Tobii T60 XL eye tracker. It is similar to a regular computer monitor but has built-in sensors that track the eye movement of the user. This is the technology that we will continue to focus on for the rest of the video.
We will now talk about how eye tracking works. As a concept, eye tracking is a rather straightforward process. The eye tracker sends out near-infrared light, the light which is reflected in your eyes. Those reflections are picked up by the eye tracker's cameras. Through filtering and calculations, the eye tracker knows where you're looking. In order for eye tracking to work as accurately as possible, the eye tracker must know more about your eyes. This is why a calibration is required. The calibration is done by following a point, video, or other graphic element that moves across the screen. This calibration data is then combined with a unique 3D model of a human eye, and together they give you an optimal eye tracking experience. There are 3 ways of clicking when using gaze interaction, and the method available depends on the application you use. The way you choose to click also depends on your abilities. Here we will talk about on different ways on how to click. First method is blink. It is possible to use blinking as a click, but it is not the best way since you lose focus of where you are looking. Dwell. You focus your eyes on a specific area for a predetermined number of milliseconds, and then a click is performed. Switch. If you're able to control a switch, it is often the fastest and most efficient way of clicking.
I'm using my eyes to control my computer. So I'm gonna see my hands are up in the air. I'm gonna go look at the left click button and I'm gonna enter the search bar. So you notice how an on-screen keyboard came up, and let's say I wanna go to Microsoft.com. And there we are. Next, so that's if I were to use completely hands-free. But we can get a much faster experience if we were to keep let's say this mouse up in the air right now as I'm showing you, and change the settings so that we're using standard mouse for clicking, but we still use eye control for mouse movement. So let's say I want to minimize, and now I want to open up a new tab. It's really easy for me to also close a tab. I just look at it and I click.
Here we will look at types of eye technology and their features. Screen-based devices require respondents to sit in front of a monitor and interact with screen-based content. Although remote devices track the eyes only within certain limits, the so-called headbox, the freedom of movement is still sufficiently large for respondents to feel unrestricted. The remote eye trackers, this is what they do. They record eye movements at a distance. They're mounted below or close to a screen. They allow the respondent to be seated in front of the device without attachments. They're recommended for observations of any screen-based stimulus material in lab settings such as pictures, videos, and websites, as well as offline stimuli. The eye tracking glasses. As the name implies, mobile devices are fitted near the eyes, usually mounted onto eyeglass frames, and allow respondents to move freely. Clearly, this is a plus sign if your study design requires performing tasks in a natural environment. On the downside, the glasses might shift during the recording if mounted sloppily. Well, the mobile eye trackers. They record eye activity from a close range. They're mounted onto light-weighted eyeglass frames. It also allows the respondent to walk around freely. Lastly, they are recommended for observations of objects and task performance in any real-life or virtual environments.
Think of all the ways that you'll use your eyes today. You might drive a car, you might read a magazine, you might surf the internet, or search the aisles of a grocery store, play a video game, even complete a training exercise, or watch a movie, or even look at pictures on your mobile device. These are the applications of eye tracking. With very few exceptions, anything with a visual component can be eye tracked. We use our eyes almost constantly, and understanding how we use them has become an extremely important consideration in research and design. The automotive, medical, and defense industries have applied eye tracking technology to make us safer. The fields of advertising, entertainment, packaging, and web design have all benefited significantly from studying the visual behavior of the consumer. Research with special populations has generated exciting breakthroughs in psychology and physiology. Every day, as eye tracking is used in creative ways, the list of applications grows.
In our everyday lives, we use two devices which are stable in the computing industry, the mouse and the keyboard. But these devices are not always the best way to interact with the content that we consume. In the past few years, eye tracking has become a large industry, but in the years to come, eye tracking will grow to become a large part of our everyday lives. Eye trackers today are thin rods which are about a ruler in length. This allows for the cameras to be concealed in a case which isn't distracting. However, for the future uses of eye tracking to become a reality, this technology has to become smaller. This change in size of technology is already evident with products we use today. The Xbox Kinect, released in November of 2010, it would use depth sensing technology to make you the controller. Fast forward 7 years and the iPhone X comes out with new technology for face recognition called Face ID. This uses the same depth sensing technology that came out with the Kinect in a package that will fit on the top of your smartphone. A large industry which will be affected by the growth of eye trackers will be virtual reality. With the shrink in size of the technology, it will allow for a whole new experience to virtual reality. Less expensive and more powerful hardware, easier and faster ways to obtain data to train algorithmic models have driven the progress of eye tracking technology. There's a chance that eye trackers will become a standard feature in the new generation of smartphones, laptops, and desktop monitors. This will drastically change the way we communicate with our devices or how they communicate with us. Tobii's business unit president Oscar Werner says, VR is about immersion. But a VR headset without eye tracking will assume that I'm speaking to a person in front of my forehead. It is approximating my area of interest to the direction of my forehead. We all know this is not true. Our real interest is where I am looking. and there is often a difference between where I look and the direction of my head. Eye tracking technology is the key to foveated rendering, a technique where only a portion of the image that lands on the fovea, which is a part of the retina, is rendered in full quality. With foveated rendering, there will be a 30 to 70% decrease in the amount of pixels drawn, which allows for a higher frame rate and higher quality with 4K headsets. Another large use case for eye tracking comes with accessibility in healthcare. Eye tracking is a breakthrough for patients with physical disabilities, especially as affordable, consumer-level devices become available. Toby's Oscar Werner says, gaze keyboards and control panels by eye tracking give people with diseases such as cerebral palsy and spinal cord injuries a means to communicate. While eye tracking can help people with disabilities, it can also help diagnose future neurological disorders. A research paper by the students at UCSD states that eye tracking technology holds promise as a method for characterizing the early features of autism, because it can be implemented with virtually any age or functioning level. Labs like iMotion are using these technologies to better understand and access the conditions of patients. Brian Farnsworth, a science editor at biometrics research company iMotion, says, infants that go on to develop autism are much more likely to have a preference for images, such as geometric shapes.
Eye tracking has provided the disabled person the accessibility or convenience to do the things that they would not be able to normally do. Eye tracking has provided the disabled person to be able to surf the internet and play video games at their discretion with convenience and do other things that a normal person would be able to do without disabilities. A person with disabilities can perform a wide range of tasks through a computer that helps them communicate more efficiently and live fuller, more independent lives. Tasks that this technology enables include the ability to open and control third-party software, communicate through dictation software, surf the web, make telephone calls, send emails, text messages, control their physical environments, create artwork, play computer games, and stay in touch with family and friends through Facebook or even Skype.
Eye trackers, however useful they are, would not be very popular if they had a high price tag. Eye trackers have come a long way from the first eye trackers made, and so has the price. Trackers used for disability patients used to cost a fortune for many people, at a price of $10,000. However, in the past few years, the price has dropped to a more reasonable $3,000, with some consumer-level products being sold at only $150. Some of the most popular trackers, like the Tobii Eye Tracker 4C, starting at $149, are in a quite affordable price range for the use case of eye trackers today. A majority of the difference in price will come down to the eye tracker's precision, freedom of movement, and recapture rate. Some trackers provide a very high measurement precision in the 0.1 degree area, and some cheaper trackers will only have a 1 degree precision. Certain models which are used for academic use and are meant for high-end precision can go up to $10,000 plus, even today.
Eye tracking systems have historically costed over $10,000 before 2010, and now that price has slowly dropped down to about $3,000 in 2017 for the average system for people with disabilities. The most affordable solution readily available on the market is $1,500 and is only compatible with small screen sizes less than 15 inches. When an individual has a disability, an eye tracking or eye gaze system is not the only cost that the family has incurred. There are separate costs such as education for children, wheelchairs, modifications to their homes to make it accessible, and many other factors. Consequently, to financially support these families, there is government subsidization available. For example, in Ontario, there is the Assistive Devices Program, which subsidizes 75% of the cost of a device that meets certain criteria and is bought from an approved vendor. This criteria includes being assessed by an occupational therapist and being prescribed a system that they can use. The remaining 25% of the cost is for the disabled individual's family to pay. Every province in Canada has their own variation for supporting people with disabilities. In the United States, there are some states that have similar initiatives, but the vast majority of families rely on an insurance company to reimburse the costs of assistive devices. From an engineering and product design standpoint, there are several design challenges involved in making a robust and reliable eye tracking system. There are two common form factors for eye tracking: remote bars and head worn. In a remote bar system, the eye tracking bar is mounted beneath the computer display and it projects infrared signals towards the user's eyes and has infrared cameras to detect the reflection off the user's eyes. Based on the strength and direction of the reflection, the software uses triangulation to determine the location on the computer display that the user is looking at. In a head-worn system, the typical form factor is some sort of glasses with tiny sensors on them, and what we see coming is that these sensors will be integrated inside virtual reality and augmented reality headsets. The technical challenges that arise in developing eye-tracking hardware are environmental disturbances such as unbalanced lighting or sunlight, which can obstruct the infrared cameras, or attaining accuracy because more sensors are needed, which increases cost of production. Beyond the challenges in hardware, there are software challenges which include compensating for the user's head movement in different distances from the computer screen while not asking the user to recalibrate, and the behavior of the eye. By default, the human eye is extremely curious and wanders around. It would be unnatural to ask an eye-tracking user to intentionally hold their eyes still so that the software can work, which is what most eye-tracking companies do today.
Created using Powtoon.